Welcome to Midnight and Murder Crime Stories. Tonight we have 10 special detective stories perfect for heavy eyelids. Dim the lights, let the quiet take hold, and let the stories carry you. Let's go. Case 1, the Echo Park Girl. Detective, Walt Renzelli. The phone rang just after dusk. A girl missing from Echo Park. No ransom, no prints. Her name was Luann Vale, 17, last seen walking her dog. The parents were calm, too calm, something about the father's eyes. Walt wrote it down, lit a cigarette, and stared out toward the orange haze. Echo Park shimmered in the distance, hot air rising off the water. He'd seen too many runaways, too many lies. This didn't feel like either. She had vanished between two palm trees, nothing but the leash left behind. It had been cut clean, not chewed, not snapped. And the doe? Never found. The neighbors were artists, sculptors, photographers, jazz types. They said they saw Luann often, walking early mornings alone. One mentioned a red convertible parked near the curb all week. Another mentioned hearing saxophone music every night at 2 a.m. Walt checked the garage, empty, but the floor had fresh oil spots. He found a pack of Chesterfields in a lipstick cap on the rear stairs. The color was sunset pink. He scribbled it into his pad. Behind the bushes, a shoe. Not Luann's size. Too large. Men's. He looked up at the power lines. Birds didn't land there anymore. Something had shifted. He found the saxophone player on the pier, blowing smoke into the night. Name was Jackie Cruz. Claimed he'd seen Luann once, maybe twice. She liked music, Jackie said, eyes hidden behind mirrored shades. He hadn't seen the red convertible, but said someone else had. Tall man, thin, real sharp suit, smelled like expensive soap. Jackie pointed toward the East Hills. Try Chavez Ravine. Weird stuff out there. Walt handed him a matchbook. Call me if you remember more. Jackie lit up, blew another solo. The last note hung in the air like it didn't want to fall. Walt felt the hairs on his neck rise. Chavez Ravine was still half rubble, half memory. Empty roads, bulldozed homes, and ghosts in lawn chairs. Walt found the convertible, abandoned, rusted, but recently used. Trunk open. Inside, a faded map, a lipstick kiss on the windshield, a blanket, blood-stained at the corner. He called it in, then waited by the hood. The sun was setting, sky painted red and gold like old wine. He didn't hear the footsteps at first, just the click of heels. A woman in black stood by the edge of the clearing. I warned her not to follow, she said. She said her name was Karina Vale, Luann's aunt, from San Francisco. Claimed she'd come looking after a strange letter arrived. No return address. Walt showed her the trunk. She didn't flinch. She's not dead, but she's not safe either. He didn't like riddles, but her eyes said she wasn't lying. Karina said Luann had been meeting someone named Dante. Said he lived in a house without numbers, just past sunset in dead silence. Ask for the purple door, she whispered. Then she vanished into the dusk, leaving only the scent of smoke and jasmine. Walt noted it all, drove west. Sunset was quiet, too quiet, not even a dog barking. He found it eventually. The door was more lavender than purple. No bell, just a tarnished lion knocker. Inside, incense. Velvet chairs, dim light. A man named Dante answered in bare feet and silk. He offered tea. Walt declined. Dante didn't deny knowing Luann. She was looking for something. Did she find it? Walt asked. Dante smiled sadly. Some people disappear to be seen. Behind him, a red leash hanging on the coat rack. Dante led him to the back, a garden full of wind chimes and silence. She came here to forget, he said. Her father was not who he said he was. Walt pressed. Dante said nothing more. He spotted a journal tucked beneath a potted fern. Inside, pages of drawings, thoughts, confessions. Luann's handwriting. Mentions of a cabin near Topanga. A place to be no one. The final line, I'm safer here, where names don't follow. Walt took the book, nodded to Dante, left through the garden. The chimes played a strange, familiar tune. The sun had fully set. Topanga was a ghost town after dark. He followed the journal's map to a cabin overlooking a dry lake. Inside, candles burned low. A dog barked once, then silence. Luann stepped into the light. Thinner, older, eyes too knowing. I just wanted to leave before they made me disappear. Walt sat down, said nothing. Let her talk. He didn't arrest her, didn't call it in. He gave her the leash and the journal. When he left, she was walking the dog under the stars. Sometimes vanishing is a kind of survival. Case 2, the Hotel Marisol affair. Detective Nora Valdez, room 506, was booked under a fake name. No luggage, no ID, only the smell of burning plastic drifting under the door. Detective Nora Valdez arrived just after sunrise. The fire was out, but the smoke still clung to the wallpaper. The body was in the tub, male, mid-40s, suit still on, burn marks on his hands, water cold, cigarette in the sink. The ceiling fan spun slowly as if trying to forget. On the mirror, a finger-written message. Not him. And on the TV, a paused soap opera, static hissing underneath. Nora closed the blinds, lit a fresh stick of gum. This would take all day. The front desk kid wore a smile like a pasted sticker. Said the man checked in around 11 p.m. Alone, paid in cash, asked for matches, had an accent. Like Cuban or Colombian, maybe, the kid offered. Nora raised an eyebrow. You always guess accents? He laughed nervously, shrugged. Only when someone ends up dead. She asked for the guest book. He hesitated, then handed her a ripped page. Room 506 had been booked twice that week. Same name, different handwriting. She copied both. One neat, one jittery. It wasn't a suicide. That much was certain. Surveillance caught her at midnight. Green dress, dark sunglasses, hair like ink, purse clutched to her ribs like a secret. She entered room 506, left 20 minutes later. No footage of her arriving, just vanishing in reverse. Nora zoomed in. Her face looked familiar. An old case, maybe? Or something from the news? She called records, asked for past arson-related disappearances. The name Inez Madera came up twice. Both times, fire, water, and missing men. Nora whispered the name aloud. The TV turned itself on. Soap opera voices blurred into static. In the ashtray, a brass lighter engraved with a bird in flight, the initials JT on the underside. Nora traced it to a jazz club on Western called the Siren's Nest. Owner remembered him, John Tavares, sax player. Smooth hands, fast fingers. Said he hadn't shown up in weeks. Last seen with a woman in green. Nora ordered coffee, listened to the house band rehearse. They played a song she'd heard in the hotel room, same melody from the paused TV, same static in her chest. Someone was playing games with memory, and they knew she was listening. Back at the Marisol, she noticed something odd on the 5th floor. Rooms 502 through 505 lined up perfectly, but 506's window didn't match the building's layout. She knocked on the wall behind the tub, hollow. Maintenance was reluctant, but brought the key. Behind the panel, a narrow chamber lined with mirrors, a bed, an old reel projector, and a stack of tapes labeled with dates. She watched one. It was room 506, her standing over the tub. But the body moved, looked straight into the lens, smiled, then disappeared. The reel projector played itself that night. Nora woke to saxophone music drifting from her kitchen. The lighter was on her counter, lit, burning. She picked it up, cold to the touch. In the mirror, someone else's silhouette behind her. She spun. Empty room, just her own breath. The tapes began to unravel, as if re-editing themselves. She grabbed one and ran it back through. It showed the woman in green, Inez, watching her. And behind Inez, flames. Nora drove to the Channel 4 archive downtown. An old friend, Wallace, let her in. The dates on the hotel tapes matched missing footage from their news library. Local fires, cold cases, disappearances never solved. She found one labeled JT, not a man, a message. Join them. The woman in green always nearby. Inez wasn't just a person. She was a pattern, a thread of heat through half the city's missing persons list. Wallace asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. Outside, it started raining, but only on her car. The Marisol stood silent when she returned. Room 506 was clean. Too clean, no scent, no echoes. The mirror had no message. The tub was dry. She sat on the bed, waited. The TV flickered to life. A woman in green smiled on screen. "I keep the ones who get too close," Inez said. "You're not the first. You won't be the last." Nora lit a cigarette with the brass lighter, blew a single ring of smoke. "Then let's talk." The screen went black, but the flame kept burning. Case 3, the Silver Palm Confession. Detective Ruben Ortiz. Ruben Ortiz liked his coffee scalding and his witnesses nervous. He sat at Silver Palm Diner waiting. A waitress refilled his cup for the third time. At exactly 10:12 a.m., a man in priest clothing entered, sweating, pale. He sat across from Ortiz and whispered, "I think I've killed someone." Ortiz raised an eyebrow. "Start at the beginning." The priest said the name, Lydia Bright, missing for a week. Said she came to confession, then never left. "I didn't touch her," he added quickly, but something changed. Ortiz stared at the trembling fingers around the mug. This would be no ordinary testimony. Lydia Bright was a jazz vocalist, played clubs from El Segundo to Echo Park. She vanished after a late show at Club Paloma. The bartender remembered her laughing with a man in a black shirt. Ortiz visited the club. Dim, perfumed, dark red booths, dusty chandeliers. The owner said Lydia was talented but lonely, kept to herself. Found her wallet in the alley 3 days later. Empty. Ortiz asked for the security reels. There were none. But a waitress gave him a napkin Lydia had drawn on. It was a church, with stained glass eyes instead of windows, and a figure in the doorway holding a candle. The priest had a name, Father James Emery, transferred from New York after a breakdown. He said Lydia was troubled, spoke of fire and voices, said she would stare at the confession booth wall for minutes in silence, then whisper things he didn't understand. Ortiz visited the church, old Spanish revival. The pews were dusty, the candles fresh, and in the confessional, claw marks on the inside wood. He pocketed a rosary, just in case. The air smelled of ash. The church kept a recorder in the booth, part of a voice study. Ortiz took the latest tape and listened at home. Lydia's voice soft. He watches behind the red glass. Then, "My name isn't Lydia anymore." A click, a whisper, then a second voice, male, deep, mocking. Ortiz replayed it 3 times. The male voice wasn't Father Emery's, and it said, "She chose to stay." He checked the church records. Lydia had never been baptized. No Lydia Bright on the confession rolls, but a visitor log showed someone named L. Ember. An archivist named Clara showed Ortiz a painting from 1891. It hung in the rectory, recently uncovered from under cloth. The painting showed a woman in red singing in a church. The crowd's faces melted into shadows. Clara said it was based on local legend, a spirit who sang sinners into silence. Ortiz asked if she believed it. Clara nodded once. "There's always one singer," she said, "and one witness." That night, Ortiz found another napkin drawing, this one in his jacket. He hadn't put it there. It showed him asleep in bed, and Lydia watching. He returned to the church with a warrant, searched the basement. Behind shelves of hymnals, he found a door. It opened to a smaller chapel, candles still burning, and on the altar, a record player spinning. The voice on the vinyl was unmistakable. Lydia singing. Her voice echoed off the stone, distant, unnatural. He followed the sound to a wall, tapped it, hollow. Behind it, a narrow crawl space. Inside, clothes, jewelry, a microphone, and a note. "I'm not trapped. I'm part of it now." Ortiz brought the vinyl to an audio tech he trusted. She said there was more than one voice on the record. Said the frequencies beneath Lydia's were irregular, not human. She isolated the background, played it for him. It was his own voice, whispering from the tape. He hadn't spoken those words, not yet. Do you still hear her? The voice asked. He did. At night, in the shower, in the silence between sentences. Lydia wasn't lost. She was performing. The priest vanished 2 days later. No note, no prints. Ortiz returned to the Silver Palm and sat in their booth. The jukebox played a track no one remembered installing. Lydia's voice, clear as crystal. You followed the sound. He sipped his coffee, didn't flinch. Outside, it began to drizzle. The window fogged. A reflection formed beside his, not his own. She leaned in, whispered something the recorder wouldn't catch. He nodded, stood, and walked into the rain. The seat across from him stayed warm for hours. Case 4, the Catalina Key. Detective Leon Booker. It came in a weathered envelope. No stamp, no address. Inside, a brass key and a photo of a bungalow at sunrise. Leon Booker hadn't been to Catalina Island in 15 years. The key was etched with the number, 17B, and nothing else. The photo was recent. A woman stood in the doorway. She looked like his sister, but his sister was buried in 49. He packed light, told no one, caught the last ferry from Long Beach. The boat rocked, skies clear, ocean flat like glass. Everyone looked like ghosts under the fluorescent deck light. Booker didn't sleep that night. 17B sat at the end of a dirt lane bordered by tall eucalyptus. The bungalow had chipped green paint and a lazy wind chime. No car, no mailbox, curtains drawn. He knocked. No answer. Tried the key. It fit. The door creaked open to a cold, lemon-scented room. Dusty photos on the mantel. One of them was him. As a boy, holding a red kite. He didn't remember that day. A record player spun silently in the corner, the needle resting on static. He shut the door behind him. The bedroom was small, sheets tucked tight, no mirror. In the closet, a stack of journals, bound in red thread. Each one began with the same phrase. I remember him now. Pages filled with looping script. Dreams, visions, maps. One map led to a cove Leon had played in as a child. He flipped further. An entry read, if he finds this, he's not safe. The date matched the day his sister vanished. He checked the last page. Blank, except a fingerprint in ash. A sound from the hallway made him freeze. The record had started playing. He turned it off. Silence rang louder than the song. In the fireplace, a curled photo, half burned. He pulled it free. 4 people, smiling at the beach. 2 of them were dead. One was him. The last figure, the woman from the bungalow. Only her eyes had been scratched out. He took the journals and locked the door behind him. The ferry didn't leave until morning. He had time. He made his way toward the cove and tried not to think about the finger in the ash. The cove hadn't changed. Cliffs, cold water, and the wind. An old man in a wetsuit sat on a rock, drying gear. Said his name was Whitaker. Said he saw a woman down there once. She waved, he said, but didn't come up. Leon asked when. Whitaker said, last week, but I knew her face. Said he'd seen her in the 40s, same age. Leon asked if he believed in ghosts. Whitaker said, only the ones that remember you. He handed Leon a coin from the water. On one side, the Catalina ferry, on the other, her initials. Leon visited the Island Hotel, asked for old guest books. The clerk was skeptical but curious. They found records going back 2 decades. In the 1949 register, room 17B had a guest named J. Booker, his sister, but listed as a male, underlined next to her name, do not disturb. Leon asked for a copy. The clerk hesitated. There's something weird about that room, she said. He tipped her, took the page. A shadow passed across the window. He returned to the bungalow at dusk. The lights were on, but no one answered. Inside, the record played again, softly. In the hallway mirror, his sister, younger, watching. He reached out. Her reflection didn't move. He touched the glass. It felt like water. The journals on the floor were open to a new entry. It read, tell him I'm sorry, but I chose to stay. The front door opened by itself. The wind smelled of sea and smoke. At sunrise, Leon boarded the ferry back to LA. He carried nothing but the coin and a single journal. The others had vanished. So had the house. He asked the captain if they'd seen the bungalow at 17B. The man looked puzzled. There's no 17B on Catalina. Leon didn't argue, just watched the island fade behind them. In his hand, the coin was warm. In his mind, her voice sang the record's final verse. The breeze touched his neck like a farewell. And for the first time in years, he remembered the kite. Case 5, the girl at Baxter Wash. Detective Raymond Razor Dunn. Baxter Wash was a dry riverbed that sometimes wasn't. Raymond Dunn got the call just after dawn. A girl's body, pale dress, one shoe, no ID. She was face down, arms above her head, as if mid-dive. No marks, no bruises, not even a scrape. She'd been placed there, gently, deliberately. The sheriff from Lancaster had no leads, no name, but a Polaroid had been tucked in her dress. A red Mustang, out of focus, someone waving. Dunn pocketed it, lit a cigarette, felt the day get heavier. The coroner said she hadn't drowned. Cause of death, a single injection, base of the skull, fast, clean, precise. He guessed her age around 20. Brown eyes, old fillings. No defensive wounds, fingernails freshly painted. There was a number written on her heel in pen, 63-2. Dunn asked for prints, got nothing back. But the coroner handed him something odd, a matchbook in her pocket, from a place called Rudy's Mirage. He'd never heard of it, but it sounded like trouble. Rudy's Mirage wasn't in the phone book. He found it in a desert town not far from Palmdale. Pink neon, no windows, one door. Inside, velvet booths, jukebox, empty stage. The bartender knew her, called her Cassie. Said she danced there once, but disappeared weeks ago. Last seen with a man in a white suit and sunglasses, no name, paid in $100 bills. He talked weird, the bartender said, like he was reading. Dunn asked if he'd ever seen him again. Only in dreams. He tracked the Mustang to a motel off Route 66. Desk clerk remembered it. You don't forget a red Stang, said a man in white checked in with a girl. They left around midnight, only he came back. He paid in cash, left no name, just a silver tie pin. Dunn found it still in the room, a serpent eating its tail. In the wastebasket, pages torn from a medical textbook. The word hypodermic underlined in red. Someone was studying or practicing. Either way, the girl never made it out. The tie pin traced to a medical college near Pasadena. A professor remembered a student named Branton Lee, top of his class, dropped out, said he wasn't learning fast enough. Dunn visited Lee's last address, a trailer in the Mojave. Inside, anatomy charts, mirrors, voice recorders, and a wall full of women's photographs, each with a date and number. One was Cassie, another, a girl missing since '62. Dunn found a map with red X's along desert roads. A tape recorder clicked on. A voice said, "The desert cleans the soul." An old friend at LAPD said another girl, Eve Marcus, had vanished last year. Same MO, same kind of message left behind. Cassie's fingerprints matched Eve's. Fake name. She'd been on the run from something, maybe someone. There were letters, postmarked from LA but unsigned. Each warned her to stay away from red cars and white suits. The most recent said, "If he finds you, go to Baxter Wash." Why there? Why that place to die? Or was it the only place she thought she'd be found? Dunn staged the same car and dress at the wash. Waited in his own car 2 nights straight. On the third, someone approached the setup. Tall, pale, white suit. No sunglasses this time. He moved like he'd rehearsed it. Dunn stepped out, gun drawn. Branton Lee. The man didn't run, just smiled. "Tell me what she said before she died." Lee blinked. She whispered, "Yeah, she thanked me." Dunn cuffed him, but felt no relief. Branton Lee didn't ask for a lawyer. Said he believed in resonance. Said pain leaves echoes. He spoke for hours, calm, clear, like giving a lecture. He'd killed 7, maybe 9. Never the same method twice. Cassie was different, though. She forgave me before it happened. He said she wanted to be remembered. Said the desert was the only place honest enough. Dunn wrote it all down. Didn't tape it. The last thing Lee said was, "She's still waiting there." And in his sleep that night, Dunn saw her, standing, smiling, waving goodbye. Case 6, The Widow's Light. Detective Nadine Pierce. The call came at midnight, a jumper in Westlake. Detective Nadine Pierce was already dressed. She didn't sleep much. A body lay beneath the fire escape behind the Valmere apartments. Female, mid-30s, red robe, bare feet, no purse, no eye, no witnesses. The building manager said she lived in 4C, alone, quiet. He hadn't seen her in days. Her window was open, her tea was still warm, and the fire escape ladder was up, which meant she didn't jump. Her name was Eleanor Glass, widowed in 59. Husband died in a boating accident near Santa Monica Pier. No children, no family on record. Her apartment was immaculate, too perfect. Photos removed from frames, journals half burned in the fireplace, a single newspaper clipping on the fridge. Valmere to be demolished. Nadine checked the lease. Eleanor had paid a year in advance. In the bedroom, a packed suitcase under the bed, and a single earring in the sink, pearl stained red. Someone else had been there. A neighbor, Mr. Delgado, remembered something strange. Said Eleanor had a visitor last week. Tall man, long coat, not a relative, not friendly. Delgado saw him leave, but only in the mirror. When he looked directly, the hallway was empty. He said the Valmere had bad luck since 54. Gas leaks, fires, vanishings. Said Eleanor once told him, "He's not done with me yet." Nadine wrote it all down. Then she noticed her reflection blink when she didn't. The building's hallway lights flickered between floors. She climbed to 4C again. It felt colder. The bulb in the stairwell popped when she passed. Inside Eleanor's apartment, the air smelled of roses and dust. Nadine opened the closet. Inside, a lamp, still glowing, not plugged in. She took it with her, didn't tell anyone. That night it flickered at 2:17 a.m. exactly, the same time Eleanor had died. A voice whispered through the lampshade, "He followed me home." The city archive had files on Valmere's residence. Eleanor and her husband moved in 1953. Her husband's name, Lionel Glass, naval engineer. He was reported missing, not dead. No body recovered. A handwritten note in the file said, "Unusual electrical burns." Eleanor had filed 2 noise complaints, both denied. One complaint referenced a man walking through walls. Nadine checked old blueprints, found a hidden room between 4C and the stairwell. It wasn't in any modern plans. She got a permit and a crowbar. The room was small, lined with copper mesh and broken bulbs. Burned photos covered the walls, none of them recent. All showed Eleanor, in different places, decades apart, always wearing the same robe, always looking behind her. A single note was tacked to the far wall. "Keep the light on." The air inside buzzed like electricity. She brought the lamp, set it on the floor. The buzz stopped. For the first time, the room felt still. The coroner updated her. Time of death revised, 2:17 a.m., no trauma. Heart failure, likely stress-induced. Nadine showed him the red-stained pearl. He said it wasn't blood, it was oxidized copper. She revisited the apartment, found a second lamp under the bed, switched it on. Nothing happened. Until 2:17 a.m., when both lamps pulsed once. And she heard footsteps in the hall, but saw no one. She spoke aloud. "Eleanor, what did you leave behind?" And a whisper replied, "He's not in the light, he's the dark between." She sealed the hidden room with tape and copper wire, left both lamps inside, locked the apartment, filed her report as inconclusive. No foul play, but requested the building be raised early. Before sunrise, she stood outside watching the windows. One flickered, then another, then dark. No more voices, no more mirrors blinking. Nadine walked to her car, feeling weightless, and in the rear view, the widow nodded once, then was gone. Case 7, the Crimson Archive. Detective Marlo Shaw. At the heart of downtown stood the Bradbury Library Annex, sealed since 1957. Detective Marlowe Shaw was called after a janitor found blood under the door. Old lock, no break-in, no open windows. Inside, the smell of iron and dust hit hard. Books toppled, tables overturned, and in the far corner, a hand, attached to nothing but a wrist, cleanly severed. A note stuck between two books. I told the truth, and now I'm gone. Security footage showed no entries for 3 months, but the logbook in the guard booth had a new signature. Name, Evelyn Dartmoor, deceased since 1951. The janitor said something else. The lights in the wing had flickered for a week. Always around 3:03 a.m., same time the security tape cut out. Every night, same time a typewriter had started clacking in an empty office. All entries ended with one word typed over and over: return. The city's head archivist, Henry Bell, met Shaw in the records room. He looked pale, unsure, said the wing stored sensitive collections, war-era intelligence, blackmail files, sealed court evidence. Bell admitted that Dartmoor had once worked there, disappeared during a file audit. Her body was never found, her files never accounted for. Marlowe asked for the access logs. Bell hesitated. Those files were not meant for eyes anymore. Still, Shaw pushed. Found 3 names signed in, one recently. The latest had a red fingerprint beside it. Not ink, blood, still tacky. Bell mentioned something else, then paused. Sometimes I hear her name, whispered in the vents. He looked toward the ceiling. And something else, like pages turning in reverse. Behind a fallen filing cabinet, Shaw found a crimson leather journal. No title, no author. Pages filled with strange symbols and sketches. One page featured a diagram, 3 circles, connected by jagged lines. In the margin, memory binds, truth shatters. Shaw photographed it, then flipped to the last entry. Dated 1 day before Dartmoor's death, it read, "He walks the rows again. I tried to leave, but my name is sealed now." There was a fingerprint pressed beside it, identical to the one in the logbook. Marlowe wasn't sure whose fear he felt more, hers or his own. Beneath the fingerprint, tiny letters appeared. Reading is remembering. The sentence changed while he watched. Now it read, "Being read is being found." The basement of the annex housed the microfilm archive. Dust clung to the machines like moss. Shaw found a reel marked D 1951, Dartmoor. He played it, grainy black and white, a woman reading in a long coat. Then the lights flickered in the footage. The woman turned and stared directly into the camera. Her mouth moved silently. Then on the film, she vanished mid-frame. The reel snapped, machine shorted, lights flickered in real life too. Shaw rewound it manually. No woman on the second viewing, just an empty chair. But this time, there was a typewritten page lying on the seat. Same word as before. Return. The image burned faintly after he turned the projector off. Marlowe stayed after hours, explored deeper rows in the annex. Past a wall of case law files, a section labeled Ephemeral Collection. Books with no titles, binders humming with static. He opened one, pages that shifted when touched. Another, blank, but cold. The third had Dartmoor's signature, signed again and again in spirals. Then a whisper, unmistakable behind his shoulder. "Please stop." He turned. No one. Only a flickering bulb. And an open book on the floor, a page he hadn't opened. It had his own name on it, and beneath, Archive in Progress. His hands trembled as he closed the book. The shelf behind him rearranged itself when he blinked. Shaw requested police files on Dartmoor's original disappearance. Half had been redacted, the rest missing. One internal memo remained. Request denied. Subject has been archived. He returned to the annex, found Bell missing. In Bell's office, a recorder still running. Bell's voice? "They can't read what's never said aloud." Tape cut, followed by static. Then a phrase in Dartmoor's voice. "They've filed you now." And a second voice deeper. "Close the book." The recorder melted in his hand. A new folder appeared on Bell's desk, labeled Addendum. Inside, an old photograph of Shaw, younger, and Evelyn Dartmoor beside him. Neither of them were smiling. Marlowe followed a trail of ink footprints down to a forbidden sublevel. Inside, vats of dark liquid, pages pinned to walls, faces drawn in ink, then crossed out. The air reeked of burnt paper and iron. One wall bore his badge number, underlined in dripping black, and a handprint, still wet. He turned to leave. The door had disappeared. The ink on the floor shifted, formed letters. Name the lie. He whispered, "She's not gone." And the room fell silent. The vats began to bubble. A voice rose from the walls. "Truth doesn't hide, it rewrites." One face on the wall blinked. It was his own. He awoke in his car, parked outside the annex. The journal was gone. So was the recorder. His badge, once silver, now stained red. No one remembered Bell. No records of Dartmoor in city files. But the annex was closed the next day, sealed permanently. On his desk, a folder appeared, labeled Marlowe Shaw, pending. Inside, one page, blank. He turned it over. One line written, "Your story begins here." From the hallway, he heard pages rustling, and a woman's voice reading aloud. The light on his desk flickered twice. Then his phone rang, though it hadn't in days. When he picked up, the voice said, "Next entry begins now." Case 8, the missing manuscript. Detective Sarah Chen. Sarah had seen many peculiar cases in her 20 years with the department, but the theft at the university's rare book collection presented an unusual puzzle. Professor Edmund Hartwell had discovered that a 16th century manuscript on botanical remedies had vanished from the climate-controlled vault, yet there were no signs of forced entry. The security footage showed nothing unusual, just the regular parade of researchers and librarians going about their daily routines. The manuscript, valued at nearly $500,000, had simply disappeared between Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning. Chen began by interviewing the staff. Margaret Winters, the head librarian, had worked there for 30 years and knew every book in the collection. She explained that only 5 people had access to the vault: herself, Professor Hartwell, 2 graduate research assistants, and the security supervisor. The first research assistant, David Kim, had been working late on his dissertation about medieval medicine. He admitted to accessing the vault Tuesday evening, but insisted he had only looked at his usual materials. The second assistant, Elena Rodriguez, had not been in the building for 3 days due to illness, a fact confirmed by her doctor's note. Chen noticed something interesting while reviewing the security logs. The electronic keycard system showed that Margaret's card had been used to enter the vault at 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday, well after the library's closing time. When confronted, Margaret seemed genuinely confused, claiming she had left the building at 6 p.m. and had gone straight home to care for her elderly mother. The breakthrough came when Chen examined Margaret's keycard under a magnifying glass. Tiny scratches around the magnetic strip suggested it had been recently duplicated. A check of local locksmith shops revealed that someone had indeed made a copy of a university keycard the previous week, paying in cash and providing no identification. The investigation led Chen to Thomas Brennan, a former employee who had been dismissed 6 months earlier for attempting to sell rare books from the collection. Brennan had maintained his relationship with David Kim, who had unknowingly provided information about the manuscript's location and value during casual conversations. The case was solved when Chen discovered that Brennan had used his knowledge of the building's layout to access the staff break room after hours, where Margaret had left her purse and her key card in an unlocked locker. He had made the duplicate key, returned the original, and waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. The manuscript was recovered from Brennan's apartment, carefully wrapped and ready for sale to a private collector. Margaret's key card showed no signs of having been missing, and the theft had been planned with meticulous attention to detail. Everything except the tiny scratches that gave the perpetrator away. Case 9, the Garden Party Mystery. Detective Lisa Hartwell. Lisa arrived at the Pemberton estate on a crisp autumn morning to investigate what appeared to be a simple case of vandalism. The previous evening, the wealthy widow Mrs. Evelyn Pemberton had hosted her annual charity garden party, and someone had systematically destroyed her prized rose garden during the event. What made the case intriguing was that the vandalism had occurred while 200 guests mingled on the estate grounds. Mrs. Pemberton's roses, some varieties she had cultivated for decades, had been cut down with precision, not torn apart in anger. This suggested someone with botanical knowledge had committed the crime. Hartwell began by studying the guest list. The party had attracted the town's social elite, including several people who had ongoing disputes with Mrs. Pemberton. There was Jonathan Hayes, whose development project had been blocked by Mrs. Pemberton's environmental activism, and Dr. Patricia Vance, who had been passed over for the head position at the Botanical Society in favor of Mrs. Pemberton's candidate. The timeline was crucial. The roses had been intact when the party began at 6 p.m., as evidenced by numerous photographs. The destruction was discovered at 8:45 p.m. when Mrs. Pemberton led a group of guests to see her newest hybrid variety. The damage had been done with professional pruning shears, cutting each plant at specific points that would make regrowth nearly impossible. Hartwell interviewed the catering staff, who had been moving between the house and garden throughout the evening. Maria Santos, the head caterer, mentioned seeing someone in gardening clothes near the rose beds around 7:30 p.m. She had assumed it was one of Mrs. Pemberton's regular gardeners doing last-minute maintenance. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Hartwell discovered that Mrs. Pemberton's head gardener, Robert Chen, had quit 2 weeks earlier after a heated argument about modern gardening techniques. Chen had been with the estate for 15 years and knew every plant intimately. However, Chen had a solid alibi. He was at his daughter's wedding in another state, with dozens of witnesses and photographs to prove it. This led Hartwell to consider that someone might have impersonated a gardener to gain access to the roses without arousing suspicion. The case was solved when Hartwell examined the tool shed and found that Mrs. Pemberton's own pruning shears were missing. A careful review of the security footage revealed that Dr. Vance had borrowed a gardening apron from the shed and had spent several minutes alone in the rose garden, claiming to be admiring the plants. Dr. Vance's motive was both professional and personal. She had been developing a competing rose variety for years, and Mrs. Pemberton's hybrid threatened to overshadow her work. By destroying the mother plants, she hoped to eliminate the competition and position herself as the town's leading rose expert. The final piece of evidence came from soil samples found on Dr. Vance's shoes, which matched the specific mineral composition of Mrs. Pemberton's rose beds. When confronted, she confessed, explaining that she had spent decades building her reputation and couldn't bear to watch it be diminished by someone she considered an amateur gardener. Case 10, The Lighthouse Keeper's Secret. Detective Maria Santos received an unusual call on a foggy Thursday morning. The automated lighthouse on Rocky Point had been malfunctioning for 3 days, its beacon failing to warn ships of the dangerous coastline. When the Coast Guard sent a technician to investigate, they found something unexpected. The lighthouse keeper's quarters, supposedly abandoned for 20 years, showed signs of recent habitation. The lighthouse had been automated in 2003, and the keeper's small apartment was meant to be empty. Instead, the technician found evidence of someone living there: fresh food, recently used bedding, and personal belongings. Most puzzling was a journal detailing ship movements and weather patterns, meticulously recorded over the past 6 months. Santos began by researching the lighthouse's history. The last official keeper had been Captain William Torres, who had retired when the system was automated. Torres had lived alone in the lighthouse for 30 years, becoming something of a local legend among the fishing community. The investigation revealed that Captain Torres had died 5 years earlier, so he couldn't be the mysterious occupant. The lighthouse was owned by the Coast Guard but rarely inspected due to its remote location and automated systems. Someone had been living there undetected for months. Santos interviewed the local fishing crews who worked the waters around Rocky Point. Several fishermen mentioned seeing lights in the lighthouse keeper's quarters on clear nights, but they had assumed it was routine maintenance. One fisherman, Paulo Mendez, recalled seeing a small boat near the lighthouse during early morning hours. The breakthrough came when Santos discovered that the lighthouse's automated beacon had been deliberately sabotaged. Someone had tampered with the timing mechanism, causing it to operate erratically. The journal found in the quarters contained detailed notes about when specific fishing boats and small cargo ships passed through the area. Santos realized that the lighthouse keeper's quarters provided the perfect vantage point for observing maritime traffic. The mysterious occupant had been tracking vessels for a specific purpose, most likely coordinating with smugglers who needed to know when the coast was clear. The case took shape when Santos found a connection between the recorded ship movements and a series of small-scale smuggling operations that had been reported along the coast. The lighthouse keeper's journal showed patterns that matched exactly with nights when customs officials had detected unusual maritime activity. Santos staked out the lighthouse and discovered that the occupant was Eddie Reeves, a former Coast Guard communications specialist who had been discharged 3 years earlier. Reeves had been using his knowledge of maritime protocols and the lighthouse's hidden location to coordinate drug smuggling operations. The lighthouse provided perfect cover. It was isolated, had communication equipment, and offered an unobstructed view of the shipping lanes. Reeves had been living off payments from smuggling crews who relied on his intelligence about Coast Guard patrols and fishing boat schedules. When arrested, Reeves explained that he had initially sought out the lighthouse as a place to hide from creditors. However, he soon realized its strategic value and began monetizing his observations. The beacon's malfunction had been an attempt to create confusion that would benefit his illegal activities, but it had ultimately led to his discovery. Case 11, The Vanishing Violinist. Detective Anna Reeves had investigated many disappearances during her career, but the case of Miranda Castellano presented a particularly elegant puzzle. The renowned violinist had vanished from her dressing room at the Metropolitan Concert Hall during the intermission of her sold-out performance, leaving behind only her priceless 1720 Stradivarius violin and a room that showed no signs of struggle. The evening had begun like any other. Miranda had performed the first half of her concert flawlessly, receiving a standing ovation from the audience of 1,200. During the 20-minute intermission, she had retreated to her private dressing room as usual. When her accompanist knocked on her door to prepare for the second half, there was no response. The door was locked from the inside, and security had to break it down. The dressing room was undisturbed except for Miranda's absence. Her street clothes hung neatly in the wardrobe, her makeup remained organized on the vanity, and her violin rested in its case exactly where she always placed it. The single window was painted shut and showed no signs of recent opening. The ventilation grate was too small for a person to pass through, and the walls were solid concrete. Reeves began by interviewing the concert hall staff. The building manager, Theodore Hicks, explained that the dressing room corridor was monitored by security cameras, but strangely, the footage from the crucial 20-minute period was corrupted. The security guard, James Morrison, insisted he had remained at his post throughout the evening and had seen no one enter or leave the restricted area. The accompanist, Elena Vasquez, had worked with Miranda for 3 years and described her as intensely private and somewhat paranoid about her personal safety. Miranda had received threatening letters from an obsessive fan in recent months, though the police had been unable to identify the sender. The letters expressed an unhealthy fixation on Miranda's performances and contained detailed knowledge of her daily routines. Reeves discovered that Miranda had been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She had changed her hotel twice, hired a private security consultant, and had been seen having heated phone conversations with someone she referred to only as David. Her manager, Patricia Lane, claimed to know nothing about any David in Miranda's life. The investigation took an interesting turn when Reeves examined Miranda's financial records. Large sums of money had been moving through her accounts in the past month, deposits and withdrawals that didn't match her usual patterns. There were also charges for a storage unit rental in a neighboring city, paid for under an assumed name but traced back to Miranda's credit card. Reeves interviewed Miranda's family and learned that her younger brother, David Castellano, had been struggling with gambling debts for years. Miranda had been supporting him financially, but recently she had threatened to cut him off unless he sought professional help. David had been bitter about this ultimatum and had been pressuring Miranda to lend him money for what he claimed was a final, sure-thing bet. The breakthrough came when Reeves discovered that David had been working as a part-time maintenance worker at the concert hall for the past 2 months. He had access to the building's blueprints and knew about the service tunnels that connected different areas of the facility. More importantly, he had been trained on the security system and knew how to create temporary disruptions in the camera feeds. Reeves mapped the building's layout and found that the service tunnels included a passage that ran directly beneath Miranda's dressing room. The tunnel was accessible through a maintenance hatch in the basement, and it connected to an exit that led to the parking garage. Someone with knowledge of the building's infrastructure could theoretically access the dressing room from below. The case began to make sense when Reeves discovered that the dressing room floor had been recently modified. David had used his maintenance access to install a hidden panel in the floor, creating a secret entrance that could be opened from the tunnel below. The work had been done gradually over several weeks, disguised as routine maintenance. On the night of the concert, David had used his knowledge of Miranda's intermission routine to access the tunnel. He had opened the floor panel and convinced Miranda to come with him, likely by claiming there was an emergency or security threat. The corrupted security footage had been his doing, timed to coincide with the intermission. Reeves found Miranda at the storage unit David had rented. She was unharmed, but had been held there against her will while David tried to force her to sign over access to her financial accounts. Miranda explained that David had convinced her to come with him by claiming that the threatening fan had been spotted in the building and that she needed to evacuate immediately through a secure route. David had hoped to make Miranda's disappearance look like a kidnapping by an obsessed fan, giving him time to access her money and disappear. He had underestimated both Miranda's intelligence and the thoroughness of the police investigation. When arrested, he confessed to the plan, but insisted he had never intended to hurt his sister. He had simply been desperate to pay off his gambling debts. The case was resolved when Miranda was safely returned to her family. The hidden panel in the dressing room floor was sealed, and additional security measures were implemented at the concert hall. Miranda eventually resumed her career, though she never performed at the Metropolitan Concert Hall again, finding too many painful memories associated with the venue where her own brother had betrayed her trust. Case 12, The Photographer's Last Shot. Detective Michael Chen arrived at the Riverside Gallery on a quiet Tuesday morning to investigate what appeared to be a sophisticated art theft. The gallery's featured exhibition, Urban Decay, A Photographic Journey, had been vandalized overnight, with several valuable photographs destroyed and the centerpiece, a large-scale print worth $50,000, stolen from its frame. The gallery owner, Susan Martinez, explained that the exhibition showcased the work of Jake Morrison, a local photographer who had spent 5 years documenting the city's abandoned buildings and forgotten neighborhoods. Morrison had gained considerable recognition for his haunting images of urban decay, and this exhibition was meant to be his breakthrough into the serious art world. What made the case unusual was the selective nature of the damage. The thief had ignored several smaller, more valuable pieces and had focused specifically on Morrison's photographs of a particular abandoned warehouse district. 7 photographs from this series had been destroyed, and the stolen centerpiece was the most comprehensive image of the entire area. Chen began by interviewing Morrison, who seemed genuinely shocked by the theft. The photographer explained that he had spent months exploring the abandoned warehouse district, documenting buildings that were scheduled for demolition. He had discovered fascinating architectural details and had developed a particular fascination with the largest warehouse, which had been empty for over a decade. The gallery's security system had been partially disabled, but not in a way that suggested professional expertise. Someone had simply cut the main power cable in the basement, causing the cameras to lose power for approximately 3 hours. The alarm system had a backup battery, but the thief had entered and left during a brief window when the security guard was making his rounds of the neighboring buildings. Chen interviewed the security guard, Frank Williams, who had been working the night shift for the gallery for 2 years. Williams explained that his routine included checking the exterior of several buildings in the arts district, and he had noticed nothing unusual during his rounds. The break-in had occurred between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. during his longest patrol route. The investigation took an interesting direction when Chen discovered that the abandoned warehouse district was at the center of a heated development controversy. A major real estate company, Riverside Development Corporation, had been trying to acquire the properties for a luxury residential project. However, their efforts had been complicated by environmental concerns and zoning restrictions. Chen learned that Morrison's photographs had inadvertently documented something significant about the warehouse district. The images showed evidence of environmental contamination, unusual discoloration in the soil and water damage patterns that suggested the presence of hazardous materials. This documentation could potentially impact the development project's environmental impact assessment. The case deepened when Chen interviewed Rebecca Hayes, the project manager for Riverside Development Corporation. Hayes claimed to be unaware of Morrison's exhibition and insisted that her company had no interest in art theft. However, she seemed nervous when Chen mentioned the specific photographs that had been targeted. Chen discovered that Hayes had been under intense pressure from her company's board of directors to expedite the warehouse district acquisition. The environmental assessments required for the project had been delayed due to paperwork complications, and any additional evidence of contamination could cause further delays or even cancel the project entirely. The breakthrough came when Chen examined the warehouse district personally. Morrison's photographs had captured details that weren't visible to casual observers. Subtle signs of chemical staining and unusual plant growth as patterns that suggested long-term contamination. These details could be crucial evidence in any environmental lawsuit or regulatory review. Chen realized that the theft wasn't about the monetary value of the artwork, but about eliminating evidence of environmental damage. Someone with knowledge of the development project had recognized the significance of Morrison's documentation and had acted to remove it from public view. The investigation led Chen to Mark Stevens, an environmental consultant who had been hired by Riverside Development Corporation to conduct preliminary assessments of the warehouse district. Stevens had attended the gallery opening and had immediately recognized the implications of Morrison's photographs. He had been pressured by Hayes to find a way to minimize the environmental concerns in his official report. Stevens had decided to steal the photographs to prevent them from being used as evidence by environmental activists who were opposing the development project. He had hoped that without the visual documentation, any claims about contamination would be harder to substantiate. The case was solved when Chen found the stolen photograph in Stevens' office, along with detailed notes about the environmental hazards visible in Morrison's images. Stevens had been planning to alter his environmental assessment to downplay the contamination, but the existence of the photographs threatened to expose his deception. When confronted, Stevens confessed to the theft, but claimed he had acted alone, without Hayes' knowledge. However, further investigation revealed that Hayes had been aware of the environmental problems from the beginning and had been pressuring Stevens to minimize them in his reports. Both were arrested for theft and conspiracy to commit environmental fraud. The case had an unexpected positive outcome for Morrison. The publicity surrounding the theft brought national attention to his work, and he was offered several exhibitions at major galleries. More importantly, his photographs became crucial evidence in stopping the development project, leading to the warehouse district being designated as a contaminated site, requiring extensive cleanup before any development could proceed. That's all for tonight. See you tomorrow.